Well, good morning, everyone. Please give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. I want to make sure that I'm not muted or doing something else wrong. That wouldn't be the first time that I've done something like that. My name is Major Ivan Rock. I know most people on this call in this virtual room. However, for the sake of those that I've not yet met, I'm the divisional commander for the Empire State Division for the state of New York, and it really is a joy to be with you here today. As is appropriate, we want to start by saying thank you. Thank you not only for attending this important event, but for your ongoing support and service to the Salvation Army. Thank you for all that you've done, for all that you're doing, for the wonderful vision that you have for the future of the Salvation Army, and for sharing that vision with us. We want you to know that we not only appreciate the time that you're giving for the guidance and the feedback that you provide, but we appreciate you. Thank you for who you are. You're a child of God serving those in need, and we just want to say thank you. You know, you get us. You understand what the Salvation Army is all about. The reason we exist, friends, is to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and to meet human needs in his name. Now, hear these two words: without discrimination. Those two words are important. To us, this all boils down to one phrase, a phrase that the officers have heard me say many, many times. We're in the business of transforming lives. Our deepest desire, our vision, our greatest hope is that God, through us, will positively change the trajectory of people's lives, both here on earth and into eternity. Through us, all of us together, united, God can and will transform our communities. He'll transform our division. He'll transform our state. Friends, we can never lose sight of our need for each other, for our need for connectedness. There's an African word that I often use. I believe it's Zulu, that speaks to this need for unity. The word is this: it's Ubuntu. It emphasizes this community. It reminds us that wholeness and real transformation are only possible through our connectedness to others, to other people, especially if those others are different from us in some way. Parker Palmer said this: we are communal creatures. We need each other's support if we are to succeed, because left to our individual devices, we have an endless capacity for self-deception, negating any possibility of real transformation or growth. Friends, we're here today to talk about making our advisory boards even stronger than they are now. We need strong local advisory boards. That's what makes the difference. I think you all know that. You get that. That's why you're here with Vision and Vitality. You see, there's a direct correlation between strong advisory boards and the achievement of mission success in our organization. And one of the most important ways that we can be stronger is through diversity. There's an author, his name is Posner. He said this: diversity, individual and organizational, enrich us. Diversity is not a threat. In fact, it's an asset. Diversity is not simply good because it implies breadth of tolerance and empathy, because it will help us be creative and innovative. By forcing ourselves to look at a wide range of possibilities, we will make better decisions and produce more accurate results. To put it in terms that we in the Salvation Army will grasp, we will be better at transforming lives. Diversity will help us as we strive to meet the needs of men, women, and children that come to us. We will accomplish more mission. In our time together this afternoon, we're going to hear from board members, from outside experts, from Corps officers. We'll hear from many different people. We'll hear from members of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We will spend time in open dialogue and hopefully accomplish what God wants for us to accomplish. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by giving this all to the Lord right now. Would you join me in prayer as we begin our time together? Lord Father, thank you so much for this opportunity, this privilege we have to come together in this way. I pray for every man and woman on this call and in this meeting. Lord, I pray that you will help us to truly listen to each other, that we will learn from each other, and we will become stronger. We will be able to accomplish more of what you've called us together to do, which is to transform lives. We give this time to you. Amen. So friends, let's make this a good time together. Let's learn from each other. Let's get stronger. Let's just get better at transforming lives. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to turn this over to Major Christine Rock as she shares with us a little bit about our journey. So Chrissy?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to meet with you today. Our journey toward building greater diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Empire State Division didn't begin in 2020. We view the steps that we're taking now as a natural extension of who we are as an organization and what matters most to us, which is demonstrating the love of God without discrimination to the people in our care, not just our clients, but everyone who comes into contact with or who is impacted by the Salvation Army. Prior to COVID-19, we set aggressive 1, 3, and 5-year goals designed to increase diversity at all levels and give greater opportunities for learning and leadership development to overlooked populations within our organization. But it wasn't until we gathered our people together to pray and to listen to their hearts after the death of George Floyd Jr. that we realized just how much we needed to learn and change in order to reach those goals. So we formed a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee to ensure that our values surrounding the dignity of every person are understood and communicated and reflected in the behavior of every representative of the Salvation Army in the Empire State Division. Some of the members of the DEI committee are here in this meeting today, and I want to say thank you to all of you who've taken the time to be here. You are precious and so helpful to this purpose. And some of them will be taking some of our questions and answers at the end of our time together today. But I wanted to say that with the creativity, the hard work, the guidance of the members of this committee, we are developing and beginning to implement a more comprehensive, insightful, and practical plan, one that continues to evolve as we learn more about the issues at hand and as we continue to listen to each other. The committee agreed that its first order of business was education. We created a list of key concepts that seemed important for everyone within our organization to understand at a base level. And then we realized that different groups of people needed different skill sets. So, for example, supervisors and department heads not only need to know how to conduct themselves personally, but how to create a culture of inclusivity within their departments and local units. Those responsible for hiring need to know how to work against biases and widen the pool of recruits. And officers need to know how to lead discussions within their congregations from a biblical perspective. So our education plan takes these variances into account. And meanwhile, as we're thinking about education, we've also worked hard to create or otherwise accumulate resources, make connections with experts and advisors, share developments with the field, and educate ourselves with tools like the United Way's 21-Day Equity Challenge, and what is beginning to feel like a mountain of books and articles and interviews and podcasts and videos, et cetera. We're so grateful that you've joined us today because clearly our relationship with and our reliance upon our advisory boards is a critical part of who we are. We want to be in this conversation together. We need to hear your point of view. And we look to our advisory board leadership to hold us accountable to the ideals to which we subscribe. We hope that you will help us to close the gap between what we believe and what results when we are not aware of or deliberately paying attention to issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, to start today, we thought it might be helpful to lay a foundation of why it's important to focus on building diversity within our organization and specifically within our advisory boards. So, we met with Evelyn Ingram of the Syracuse Advisory Board. Evelyn is the Director of of Community Engagement within Wegmans. She's a longtime supporter of the Salvation Army. And she has done amazing work with the United Way and various nonprofit organizations in Central New York. She's also just a delightful person, and we know that you're going to enjoy hearing what she has to say. So without further ado, here's Evelyn.
I had a strong family foundation of a spiritual life. Growing up in the church, my dad, was a pastor, my mother, first lady, and those experiences as what we say a PK, a preacher's kid, really determined the course of my life. And I'm very thankful for having a spiritual foundation. I'm thankful for having a relationship, with the Lord, because I really feel as if my life has been blessed and favored because of that. I grew up in Long Island, New York, and in a neighborhood, I'll be honest with you, that I thought was more middle class. I recall, it wasn't until I was exposed to other things that I realized that, maybe this neighborhood wasn't as rich in material assets as I thought it was. And at the time, again, not seeing everything fully, not realizing that the town I grew up in was very segregated. I grew up in Amityville, Long Island, New York, and there were two sides of town. There was the north side, where it's predominantly where blacks live, and there was the south side, which is where the whites live. At the time, when I think back, I don't maybe call it naive or something. I didn't really see it as segregation. But it was, even to the point where the town of Amityville had a pool. But in order to go to that public pool, you had to be a resident of what side of Amityville? The south side. North Amityville residents were not allowed into that pool. And looking back on that experience now, it was truly segregation. But I think because I didn't see the difference and I had friends of both cultures and both experiences, I didn't view it from that lens. And I think because of that, to this day, I still have friends that I keep in contact with, of all cultures. But, those differences, I think at the time, maybe others saw them, but it wasn't as evident to me. And I think I go back to, because of the spiritual focus and having a heart for God and not seeing those kinds of things, I'm okay with that. I'm not, I don't look back now and wish I would have seen differently, because I do think that helped me to be the person that I am. But I do think it is at a point now where we all have to see, and we all have to have on glasses that are enabling us to see some of the disparities that are occurring and the impact that it's having on people. And I think that's where we are. We're at a juncture in society where, all of us have to recognize that there have been some things that have been occurring over the years, whether people have seen them or not, whether they've understood them or not. We have to recognize now that we're at a point that if we want society to move forward in a peaceful manner that recognizes everyone and their experiences, we have to put on these glasses that enable us to see things as they really are. Doing community involvement work, it's been a progression of activity, and a lot of it just stems from, again, recognizing, the need to want to help. But also, I just like to do. I'm one of those people that I enjoy being busy. I like being active, and I like being productive in my action. This generation, to me, has more of a focus of doing things that help others, as opposed to just, I just want to do for me. And I'm saying that because I'm finding in, a lot of the community activities that I'm involved in, that a lot of the younger generation want to do things that are aligned to their beliefs. So I'm finding that, young people now are getting involved in the United Way at a much younger age than even I did. I mean, they recognize now the United Way, the importance that it plays, volunteerism, helping others. So I really value, this upcoming generation, their focus on wanting to do things that help. Because again, I think they see the necessity of it, and hopefully they're seeing the impact of that mentality as well. I did not start out doing what I'm doing because I wanted to be recognized as a community leader. That was not even in, my mental thought regarding what I was doing. I wasn't doing it to be recognized. And actually, even Wegmans is a very humble company. I think it's really, working for a company that has such a strong, emphasis on community service. So it puts me in a great position. I think because of, my interactions, and even, when I first took the position, it was important for me to understand the missions of all the different organizations that we support. So I would literally do site visits. I would go to the organization, I would meet their team, I would understand what their missions are, what their objectives are, what their needs are, because I felt it was important for me to really have a visual of what was occurring. The best way for you to get the best out of others is to show them who you are. The Salvation Army should show itself to the community, show what our heart is, show what our culture is. And I think if you do that, if you show people who you are, the people who are aligned with your values will automatically come. Having a diverse, staff, a diverse board, an environment that embraces diversity really only helps our mission, because now you're able to help everyone as opposed to just a segment, of the population. Because we recognize that, we do serve a lot of different residents. So I think, being able to identify with all of those that we serve is very, to me, it can only bring value and rewards to the organization. For me, when I look at serving on boards, it's important for me to represent me and the people that I represent. I try to make sure that I'm sharing those kinds of experiences when we're making, board decisions, because of the impact that it has, and hopefully the influence it'll have on impacting our community. If you have 100% agreement, that means you only have one perspective. We all like to have a full agreement because it makes our life easy, but life is not always easy. And I think being able to bring in differences and have that discussion and being able to evaluate the pros and cons of every aspect of things makes it more valuable. And there are instances where it has to be intentional. And I think sometimes, I've been in a few conversations where I've heard the discussion about, well, I want to hire diverse individuals, but I can't find them, and I don't know where to go, and I just can't. And I guess I don't buy that, because I look at us all as a community leader. If you have a problem and recognize you have a problem, you are going to do what you need to resolve that. So you as a company are looking at your slate of candidates and you realize that there's no diversity in it, and you realize that's a problem, then you're going to make some calls and do some things to resolve that problem. We have recruiting firms that focus on minority candidates, and there are ways that you can get around that to make sure that you do have a diverse pool. So, and you may have to be intentional. So yes, it may take a little more work, it may take some more effort, but if you recognize the importance of having a diverse pool of candidates leading to a diverse workforce, then you'll put in that extra effort to do that. And I think the time for excuses, I think we're at a point now where people are not accepting those excuses. And I believe if we want to have a society where everyone is recognized, encouraged, and supported, then we as companies, organizations should do what we need to do to make that happen. I'm on the board. I've been on the board for Salvation Army for many years. And, if we're looking for, diverse leadership, then maybe I'll call Evelyn and see who she knows and see who her friends are, and to me, and again, that's just a simple call to me. Let me think through my Rolodex of people who may have had conversation with me saying they had interest in serving on the board. So I think it's okay. I mean, and I've shared that we recognize that people are friends with the people they're most comfortable with. And I do think it's important to sometimes broaden that circle. But I also think that sometimes, using the resources that you have can help. When you're bringing me, you're also bringing my circle. And I think that's for everyone, you bring on, whether, and not even looking at it from a diversity perspective, just in general. When you bring someone on the board, you're bringing in their circle. So I think, making a concerted effort to reach out to people of color who have interest. And I believe that there are many that do. I believe people would be honored, to serve on boards because, even though, Syracuse is a small city and, we have there's a lot of, interaction with people, there's still a lot of prestige associated with serving on the board of directors for any particular organization. And a lot of young people, particularly in their careers, to be able to serve on the board, that's an accomplishment for them. So I think, recognizing that and recognizing that there are many people who want to serve on a board just to be on a board, but also them knowing that if their mission is that their own personal, value system is aligned with what the Salvation Army, is doing, I think you would definitely see and heightened attention on people wanting to serve.
We had so much fun talking with Evelyn, and I learned a lot from her, even within the context of that short interview. She not only talked about why we should intentionally build a diverse staff and advisory board, she touched on some of the ways that we can go about doing so, which is where Peter Dunn comes in. Peter is the president and CEO of the Community Foundation of Central New York. His organization is about 3 years ahead of us in their journey toward building greater diversity, equity, and inclusion. Peter sat down with our divisional commander to talk about the process. That is how we can go about making meaningful, sustainable changes and go from talking the talk to walking the walk. So here's Peter.
Welcome. My name is Major Ivan Rock. I am the divisional commander for the Empire State Division. That's New York. Today we have with us a very special guest. His name is Peter Dunn. He is the president and CEO of the Central New York Community Foundation, which is, I believe, the oldest and largest philanthropic foundation in the Central New York region. The Community Foundation has been on a journey toward change. Starting from within, they're aiming to address structural racism, racial disparities, and anything that stands in the way of accomplishing their mission for the greater good. And of course, along the way, they've learned some lessons. There has been significant change and important connections made. So we in the Salvation Army can and want to learn from their experience. Can you start by telling us a little something about yourself and maybe a little something about the foundation?
Sure. My name is Peter Dunn. I'm the CEO of the Community Foundation here in Syracuse, and I've been in this role for 13 years. I've been more than 25 years in the philanthropic sector. This community foundation, the Central New York Community Foundation, is 94 years old. We were created in 1927. Community foundations, by and large, are similar in that they manage charitable funds for the benefit of a community of many different types and resources. Community foundations vary on scale and mission in terms of the resources that they have. This community foundation is fortunate to have resources that have come to it over the last 90 years that offer great flexibility and the opportunity for civic leadership and impact. We're also a significantly growing organization. Currently, we administer more than 800 funds with a collective value of about $360 million. Last year, we made $20 million in grants and took significant leadership roles in COVID response with the nonprofit community and the United Way and other partners, and also made some signature investments in through our new Black Equity and Excellence Fund. So I like to think that the Community Foundation has always had equity as a guiding principle. If you look at our programmatic work, whether it's in literacy, college attainment, our significant commitments around issues of lead poisoning and lead pain abatement in Syracuse, lots of the different things that we've made signature funding commitments around as an institution have at their core racial equity. If you were to disaggregate the data and look at the impact that we're trying to have in the populations that we're trying to impact, inevitably they involve communities of color, communities in poverty, in communities that have been subject to systemic racism for a long time. If you looked at just our lead poisoning work, you would see that it is focused in communities that were redlined, where back in the 30s by the Federal Housing Administration. Their communities would have the highest rates of eviction, the lowest levels of third grade reading attainment, the highest concentration of gunshots. I mean, it goes on. And so there absolutely has been that lens going forward, but we never talked about it overtly. And so what we have gone through institutionally has been moving from it being assumed to it being infused. And not only through our programmatic work, the impact stuff that we do through our grants, but also operationally through the foundation in how we hire, how we invest, how we operate our facilities. So I think the most fundamental point isn't that it doesn't involve necessarily just the grants and the impact work that we're trying to do in the community, but we're taking the role seriously as an anchor institution in the community, the notion that to whom much is given, much is expected, which requires us to look at racial equity across all of our functions, not just our impact.
Wow. So this is, I love the way you said that. You know, it was assumed. It's always been part of who you are as a foundation, as an organization. Did you use a consultant as you move forward with this change? Is it something you did on your own?
I think that it's important to think about the scope of the work that you want to perform and not assuming that you would use any one consultant. So in our work, we've actually used 3 so far. We had a consultant to work specifically with our staff that we were able to procure, and we really wanted that consultant to have knowledge about the foundation sector. So we worked with a group called ABFE, the Association for Black Foundation Executives, which has a consulting arm. We were intentional about having a parallel track with our board, and our board really wanted to engage in learning. But what my goal was as the CEO is to have a parallel track where the staff wasn't getting too far in front of the board or vice versa. So there was a sort of a concomitant, congruent level of learning, but on a different track with different conversations. So there we retained a local consultant, Gwen Weber McLeod, who lives in Auburn, who's a former member of our board, which I really found to be useful because she was a peer of our board members. And so it was a peer conversation from someone who was very well known and local. And those were 3 iterative conversations around different items. Today, one of the things that we teased out with our staff is that around some specific issues, around issues of Black history and around issues of interpersonal microaggressions between staff, we felt there was a consensus from surveys that we did that we needed to do some more work on those. So we're working with Center State's CEO, with Dr. Johanna Rogers, and she's walking through us this summer a session of 3 conversations with staff on those topics. I think racial equity is an opportunity. I think communities that embrace racial equity will have significant community return on investment.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Right? And if you're a business person and you care about linearity and outcomes, if you were to look at some of the stuff that we fund, and I was to tell you that for every $1 that we invest in lead poisoning, we have a $20 to $200 return, you would buy that investment in a second, right? It so happens that investment also has a profound racial equity lens, because most of the kids who are impacted by lead poisoning are kids of color, mostly Black, in specific neighborhoods.
And clearly your organization, your foundation, your board, your staff, you've taken the time to work through the complexities. This process of moving from an implied equity to, right out there, it's just who we are. Has that impacted the foundation's priorities, its decisions, its day-to-day operations? And if so, can you maybe speak to that a little?
The role of racial equity just doesn't fall to community impact. It's not just in the services provided or the funding that we do or the issues that we take on. So we've been really intentional about using a mirror on ourselves and looking at different processes. And I can give you a couple examples.
Yes, please.
We've changed our job descriptions and looked at how we define new position descriptions when we hire people. We've taken out education requirements in certain roles because they weren't really necessary and they were an impediment to us getting a broader pool of candidates. We've broadened how we do our searches and as a means of getting more candidates coming from with lived experience in communities of color. We have added a diversity, equity, and inclusion goal to all staff on performance assessments each year. So we're having the conversation between supervisor and employee every year and asking people what their own journey has been. Nobody's escaping from it. It's on everybody. We've looked at our vendors. We own a building in downtown Syracuse. We have tenants. We've been looking at our vendors, and we hired a new vendor, janitorial vendor, as part of that process. We have a significant investment portfolio, as I mentioned before. Our investment consultant has been working with our finance committee to define women and minority-owned investment firms that are within the portfolio. So those are examples of what I would call infusion, thinking about our work across the organization. The last thing that I would mention in this space is that we started using a new tool. So anytime we adopt a policy, like we just adopted a remote work policy for staff. We've had social media policies, political activity policies, a lot of stuff that pertains to our operations. We now have a mechanism where after leadership and management develops those policies internally, we have an internal staff equity process where staff can, again, opt themselves in, whether they are from communities of color or not. They can opt themselves into the conversation to have a conversation around the implications of the policy from an equity perspective. So that's like a gut check. It's not staff leadership working in a vacuum. It is offering staff an opportunity to apply an equity lens to a policy. I think that being intentional and informed is important.
That's powerful. Now, like the Central New York Community Foundation, the Salvation Army's mission, equity, inclusion, it's all implied, it's all there, it's part of who we are, it's built into who we are. Part of our mission statement, in fact, says to meet human need without discrimination. And of course, without discrimination makes it very clear that, but our goal and our greatest desire is to not just have that be implied, but really be a part of who we are, infused in everything we do.
So I think towards that goal, one of the things that you can do is start thinking about how to tell your story. We've been wrapped around the notion of the Community Foundation as an anchor institution. One of the things that we paid a lot of attention to and devoted significant energy around is how we communicate issues around racial equity with our staff, with our board, and with external communities. And I think it's one thing to make a statement, it's another thing to do stuff.
Yes.
Right? So you don't want to find yourself in a space where, as an organization, you make a statement in support of communities of color and you just make a statement, right? So that's where the infusion bit comes, and what we've tried to do, if you go to our website at cnycf.org, there's a section on there about our racial equity commitment, and we put all of our stuff there. The statement that I made following the murder of George Floyd, we did a piece where we asked Black community members for their thoughts following the conviction of Derek Chauvin. We talk about our Black equity work in terms of the investments that we're making in Black-led organizations locally, the grants. So we're trying to put a bunch of resources there so people can see that it's walking the walk. So it's not just saying nice things, but you're doing stuff.
Beautiful. Thank you. We really appreciate you giving us this time. Is there any last bit of advice that we should have as a result of your journey?
I think the key word that you used and referenced there is journey. And I think it's important to undertake this work with a sense of around commitment to the common good, grace for everybody, and making sure that folks know that it's going to take some time, that it's not going to be a retreat and then everything's okay. That it's going to take a series of, an iterative series of conversations, understanding that it truly is a journey. And, we're 3 years into it, and we know we still have more work to do.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining us here today. Peter Dunn, Central New York Community Foundation. Thank you not just for being with us here and helping us talk through and think through some of these things, but thank you for the good work that you're doing in the community. It means so much to so many people.
Well, Peter gave us so many wonderful ideas, but I know sometimes within the Salvation Army, we look at what somebody else has done and we say to ourselves, well, it's kind of different for us because of the unique nature of the Salvation Army. We have some situations and particular issues that make it kind of challenging. So we really thought it was important to speak to someone within the Salvation Army who has been successful in building a healthy advisory board on more than one occasion, but specifically in building greater diversity within the advisory board. And so I'm so pleased that we're going to be talking to Major Jose Santiago this afternoon. I don't see, oh, there you are. Got a little nervous, Major Santiago. Didn't quite see you until just now, so I'm glad to see you there. And first, let me start out by saying congratulations as you celebrate 25 years this month as a Salvation Army officer.
Thank you kindly for having me and for that. Congratulations. Yeah. It's been a long journey.
Well, the world has changed a lot since you were commissioned in 1996. And I know your role and your responsibilities have changed as you've traveled or you've been appointed in various locations with different responsibilities. What would you say looks very different from when you were first commissioned as an officer?
Actually, the Christianity gets pushed more to the margins in these days than before. The values are changing in our nation and changing very rapidly. Actually, in the world, they're changing very rapidly. And we are being challenged to keep up and to keep up with the message that we have, message of hope for the community, as well as meeting the needs of the people and being sensitive to the needs of the people, even when we perhaps are not looked at in a positive way because of our very confrontational message that we have, that in Jesus we can have salvation and he's the only way to heaven.
Yeah. What do you think has sort of remained the same in all of those years for you?
For me or for the Salvation Army?
Yes, either, both.
For me, I think that what I have noticed in the community is that people still believe that the Salvation Army has something to give them, something to provide to them. The Salvation Army is a place that they can look up to for a helping hand or for an encouraging word. That has remained the same. And even during this pandemic, we have seen how the community have responded, supporting us for us to be able to continue to support those who look to us for assistance. For me, as I said, is the work. It doesn't get lighter. The demands are still there, and there's much more work to do.
Yes, yes. Well, both Evelyn Ingram and Peter Dunn have talked about the value of building diversity within their respective organizations. What do you think the Salvation Army stands to gain from intentionally looking to build greater diversity within our organization?
I like to believe that we have been doing that from a very beginning. Now, perhaps that is looking at in a naive way, but if we think about it, William and Catherine Booth and the early Salvation Army went to other countries. Within the first 20 years, they had gone to several countries already. So they found it important to engage everyone. To them, everyone was important, the people that they served in London, but also people from all over the world. And I like to look at this matter that is so important in today's conversation, in the narrative of today's conversation, rather than diversity and inclusion and equity. I like to call it interculturalism. Why? Because we are not looking at that culture and trying to invite them. We're all together in this intercultural community. And rather than say multiculturalism, that's the national identity, Interculturalism is talking about the local community, the narrative within that community, in that context in which we live and serve and try to meet people's needs and the place that our children are growing up. So it's not them and us. I like to look at it as is we are here together. Let's make a better place. And looking at the Salvation Army Advisory Board specifically, I look at it in that same point of view. I am not trying to say, okay, let me see if I can have this person with this ethnicity or that color, but no, we are all together. I'm embracing the same values that we embrace as the Salvation Army, being sure that the same percentage that we see in the community, in the local context, are represented in the advisory board. For instance, if there is 25% of the population is African American, I would like to be sure that that percentage is represented in the advisory board. So there is no one weight more than the other one, but that we are talking in a way that is interwoven, to meet the needs of the people that are out there. And I would venture to say, even people from other beliefs different than mine. I give you an example. In those days, when I was a lieutenant, we were building an advisory board in Philadelphia, and lieutenants who know it all, I was one of those, and I found that there was a Jew in our midst, and I was very without tact. I said to him, we are here to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and to meet human needs without discrimination. What is important, our message of salvation. And he was so gracious to me. He knew how ignorant my comment was. And he simply said, well, I won't preach the gospel of Jesus, but I believe in what you do for others, and I want to help you. So he was in line with our values, helping those in need, those who are down, and he was willing to give us a hand. So we want to be sure that we have a well-designed purpose as advisory board in our local context, and that people know what we want to accomplish, sell that, and then bring them with us.
Yes, very good. I like how your story points out and what you talked about, the terms that you use. I think we're learning more and more that the language we use says more than what sometimes we understand, right? And so our choice of words is so important, and our ability to listen, and that advisory board member that you talked about, right? He became a member of the board.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. He was willing to listen to you, to be open to your inexperience.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to dialogue with you, even though you came from a somewhat different perspective. And I think that's an example for all of us to follow, in a way, to listen and to be concerned about the perspectives of others. Like Evelyn said, if you all have the same opinion and there's no disagreement, you might as well have a board of one person, right?
Yes.
Who needs that? So tell me, what else have you learned from your experience about building your board? What advice might you have for those of us who are saying, yes, we know we need to create a more diverse board?
Yes, the context in which the Salvation Army is located is quite important. My advisory board in Lockport cannot look like the advisory board in Albany or Syracuse. It needs to represent the context in which we are. And I'm referring not only to the people, what they look like, ages, represent the cultures and ethnicity and gender and so on and so forth, but I'm referring also to their pocketbook. So my board in this location might be a good board that is able to open doors and get their hands dirty and volunteering and serving, yet perhaps are not able to support financially. But there might be another advisory board in another location, more affluent location, who, because they're so busy, they're not able to engage as volunteers, but they want to support financially that the work being done. So what I mean is that every advisory board needs to represent the context in which they are.
Sure.
If there is, for instance, I remember a colleague of ours who went to make a presentation to United Way, and the presentation needed to be a presentation on youth programs. And he prepared himself very well to make a presentation on senior citizens ministries. So he was completely disconnected. This is a true story. He was completely disconnected. So we can fall into that trap, trying to build an advisory board, which is completely disconnected from what the community looks like and the needs of the particular community.
Yeah. It's so helpful to get to know your community then and get to know them personally and form those relationships, isn't it?
Absolutely. Another thing that is quite important is to have the businesses in the area given the opportunity to be represented into advisory board. So people like to be wanted. People like to be needed. And offering the opportunity, say, we have noticed that your company, your corporation, your organization is not represented in Salvation Army Advisory Board. We would like to offer you that opportunity. Can be a game changer for that advisory board. Obviously, they are representing the community, and you want them to be representing their company in your advisory board, which is a voice of the community to the Salvation Army, as well as a voice of the Salvation Army to the community.
Yeah, yeah.
I find interesting the need to cherish people. As we continue to talk about this interculturalism, if we have a change of cultural thinking in our own context, that can help us then look at things differently. If we keep our minds into the same cultural way of thinking, and when I talk about cultural, I'm talking about the cultural way in which we serve, not the people, but in which we're serving, that can change then the way that we express ourselves and that we look at others. We cherish people. So we invite them to help us be part of this that we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Major Santiago, I'd love to just chat with you all day because I know that you've amassed a wealth of information and experience about this topic, and just your own experience in building boards and particularly building diverse boards. But unfortunately, we don't have all day. But we'll talk after. And and the wonderful thing about this, as I think we've gathered from Peter Dunn and from others, is that it is a journey. It is an ongoing conversation. There's no end point at which we say, oh, we have arrived. We can check off the box, the diversity box, and move on to some other topic. There's always, and I'm sure even for you, Major, there's the next step, the next goal, the next thing that you want to achieve within your board, correct?
Certainly, we have never arrived.
Never
and,
do.
And keep the board fresh, setting up the board in classes.
Yeah, very good. Well, speaking of our next steps, Major Charles Roberts is from the Syracuse Citadel Corps. He is an active member of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. He's been engaged in these topics with folks from around the world for a long period of time. And he's going to just take a few minutes to talk to us about what our next steps in the Empire State Division are going to be.
Thank you, Major, and thank you to everyone for being here and being so interested and engaged in wearing the glasses that Evelyn referred to, wearing the diversity lens that Peter referred to. Basically, if I may, just a moment, just talk about the international work a little bit. Just after the murder of George Floyd, the general contacted the International Center for Social Justice. And I'm hearing that I can't be heard, so let me turn the volume up a little bit more. The Center for International Center for Social Justice contacted a group of Black American Salvationists from around the country and wanted to engage in the work of a document that is now called Let's Talk About Racism. And that work has been completed and has been distributed to the territories, and each territory is taking its own pathway to distribute that particular material. But it's a curricular guide, it's also a discussion guide, it's powerful material, and it's hopeful. The bottom line is, even though the symphony's never finished for diversity, equity, and inclusion, we can look to hope because our message is timeless. Our message is timeless. Jesus Christ came to save a sinful, suffering humanity, and he's given us the grace to help make saints, people who can be change agents in the world. And as one of the leaders at Syracuse Citadel Corps, our goal is to give people opportunities to gain resilience through Christian faith, to get strong and become the builders of streets with dwellings, as Isaiah would say. So the international work is going on, and in this territory, we are in the process of developing a facilitation training that'll be territory specific, and we'll have some trained leaders throughout the territory. Each territory is asked to provide an officer and a soldier to our division, our territorial DEI secretary, Lieutenant Colonel Ray Jackson. And so we're excited about this infusion across the entire organization that Peter was talking about. We're looking to infuse equity lens everywhere. And so here are the next steps that divisionally we're taking part. One, the division has made the decision to add Juneteenth to its list of employee holidays. We celebrate it on the Friday, June 18th. And as you would know, Juneteenth is the day in which the enslaved Africans in Galveston, Texas, finally learned the news that freedom had reached them. And so that's an important holiday to celebrate. And so we're looking forward to doing that. There are great resources that the development team, as well as the territorial team, and as well as our own Major Stephen Carroll, provided to help us to celebrate Juneteenth in an informed way. That it's not a day off, it's a day on. It's a day on in terms of understanding the complexity of what wearing a diversity lens really means, learning about cultures and embracing the variety that makes up the American experiment. And so our second piece to that, infusing across the organization, is there's a baseline training that will be introduced in July. And this month, we'll be training facilitators to use the materials to gain cultural competence and understanding across the spectrum within our division. And we're recruiting facilitators even as we speak. In the fall, we'll have a leaders council, and our supervisors and officers will begin training in the fall, and our councils will be a jump off point for that process. The final piece, well, not the final piece, but the continuing piece is we're looking for ways to implement everything we've learned. We, as Major Christine said earlier, we have amassed tremendous amounts of materials, and I mean, it can almost be overload with so many things that we have encountered as a learning group. But we want to be able to, end of the day, help all people to wear the diversity lens, and to help coach people into a greater understanding if, there's a resistance of some kind. So we need help with that to help keep people accountable. We need your ideas and your questions about this. And also, we are seeking new members for our divisional committee. And so recommendations from this group would be most welcome in providing a greater diversity even within our group, so that we get every voice that we need to hear. And so with that, let me pass it back to Major Christine. Thank you.
All right. Well, we want to be respectful of everybody's time. I don't know if I see any questions in the chat section or raised hands, but I'm just going to put it out there now. Do we have any questions, any comments or ideas? If you do, you can either, post them in the chat, and if we don't get to them by the end of the hour, we'll get back to you. And also, we have the members of the diversity committee with us, as I mentioned earlier. I see Lieutenant Bassie Archibong is here, Major Charles Roberts is here. I believe Linda Wright is with us. I wasn't exactly sure who was going to be here from the team today.
How do I get involved with the diversity group? My name is Bob Reed, and I'm on the executive board of the YMC, of the Salvation Army here in Saratoga. And
Yes.
That's a good thing. I'm not going to be able to stay with you very long, so I want to get a couple of points across. I'm very interested. I'm glad what Peter happened to say and the kind of body of work he was doing. And I want to know if he happened to have a model that he demonstrated was taking place in his area. That's one question. Number two,
Yeah.
I'd like to be a part of this diversity training. I've got extensive background in terms of being a former professional athlete and has raised quite a bit of money, and I'm community oriented big time. The other question that I have for the young man who just finished speaking, Mr. Roberts, on the infusion, one of the things that I'd like to know in terms of, do we have a lobbyist? A lobbyist in terms on the political side of things to be able to make sure that the people who are representing us understand what you're trying to do. Because all the laws and everything always starts there in terms of the political side. And if we don't have a lobbyist, someone speaking for us and for the Salvation and Infusion program, at the political level, then, we're just marching, so to speak, raising a flag and not getting anything done when it comes down for those individuals who actually make the decisions as to how our community is going to act, such as what's happening in Texas and other particular states. So with that, I can be reached. Again, my name is Bob Reed. I'm part of the Saratoga group. And I like to be a part of what you're doing. I think you're doing great work, and I wouldn't be involved. But this infusion program really opened my eyes to some of the things that we could be doing in other states. It's something that we can maybe have the national office, for example, speak on. I see Jerry Jones put our big situation up every Thanksgiving Day and what the NFL can be done because they can have a voice in this. He represents the Salvation Army on that particular day, but where does he speak in terms of that? Me being a former player, so I've always been interested at that level, even though I know it's
Thank you, Bob, for reaching out to us and for sharing your interest in the work that we're doing.
Wait. I'm getting ready to get off. I'm getting ready to get off. Let you get back. Okay.
Okay.
You have to cut me off. So you know where to reach me. I like to be a part. You heard what I said. Keep me in
Okay.
the mix. All right.
Will do.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we'll definitely do that. I think one of the questions that you mentioned was the process that the CNY Foundation has undergone. Is that something that's replicable or that has been written down or shared in that way? And I would say from our conversation with Peter, it's more sort of an evolution as we're kind of going through. He did mention that they had spoken with 3 different consultants and that their team is just constantly looking at this from various angles. So I don't think it's like a boxed set that we can turn to, but we are gleaning what we can from his experience as well as that of others. We are an Army, so although we've been talking mostly today about what's happening in the Empire State Division, we are part of an international organization, and there are steps being taken. I think Major Roberts mentioned that we have a Lieutenant Colonel Ray Jackson at a territorial level who is heading this initiative there. And then there are representatives at the national level. I can't speak with much information about lobbyists, but I know that there are spokespeople and wonderful people within our organization that have been public about these issues and are joining hands with others. So I hope that answers some of your questions. Major Roberts, did you want to speak into any of that as well? I think he called on you.
I can speak a little bit about it. There is a national task force with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is a national commission that is looking at these similar issues across the board. With respect to lobbyists, I know our national headquarters, moved from Verona, New Jersey to Alexandria, Virginia, for the purpose of being closer to the seat of power in D.C. And I know that on that level, there are conversations had. Additionally, let me just say internationally, the International Social Justice Center is on Mission Row in New York City. That was the former Central Citadel Corps in the Greater New York Division. And so they literally are on Mission Row and are a secretariat level mission with respect to interacting with the United Nations. So there are quasi-political things happening through the mission of the Army. And then I know also there are some divisions that do legislative days where they might take a walk up to the Capitol and meet with certain representatives and bring some issues, but I don't have any further specifics on that. Major Rock, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Major. Actually, you've referenced much of what I was going to say. The Salvation Army does not engage in official lobbying. It's simply not who we are. We are not a political organization of sorts. Having said that, we are very involved in speaking for those who perhaps don't have a voice. In fact, Major Roberts, would you take a minute? You referenced the International Justice Center. Certainly, we do have national headquarters who speaks to these issues at the national level, but the Social Justice Center speaks to some of these issues at an international level with the UN. Can you take just a short second and tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I'm not part of that, but that was an international move to provide high-level conversations, initially centered around human and sexual trafficking, labor trafficking. There's a tremendous amount of work being done at the secretariat level. Mm-hmm. But with respect to racism, our general has taken quite a stand with respect to making sure that the Salvation Army's position on racial inequity is very clear. he's making it very clear. In fact, there are a series of devotional messages that are out and available on YouTube to take a look at, and maybe someone can put that link in the chat at some point in life, or we can get it to you later. Social justice is at the heart of what we do, and social justice is living the life of Jesus, and living the life of Jesus, helping others to live in that life as well. So it is essential to what we do, and we can't really do much without it. But there's significant training. There are podcasts. There are workshops that the International Social Justice Center does that are available virtually. I don't know how much in-person stuff is going on at the moment, but like I said, they're at the secretariat level. So they're also at the, they're connected to United Nations Prayer Partners, which is a group of Christian believers that work in the UN and pray regularly for unity and peace and salvation in the world. And so they're just integrated in the entire warp and woof of what the UN is doing in terms of human rights, sustainable development goals that the United Nations have put forth are really the agenda items for the Social Justice Center, and relate totally to human flourishing in every aspect.
Mm.
Mm. Well, thank you, Major Robert. And once again, I want to say thank you to, some of them didn't even get a chance to talk, but the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, your work is so valuable, and each of you have contributed in a meaningful way. And as Major Roberts has mentioned, we are trying to build our committee up so that we can have more effective subcommittee work and just ensure that every voice is heard. So I want to just say thank you to everybody who has joined us today. Thank you for your thoughts and your opinions and giving us this hour. This is an ongoing conversation that we hope will not be just one way, us toward you, but that you will reach out to us and help us, as we said earlier, to be held accountable to practicing what we preach and doing what we believe. So God bless you, each one of you. Have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you at the next Vision and Vitality meeting. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.